Welcome to the Free the Bear podcast. My name is Bill, and this is episode 4, A New Progressive Voice. Josh from New Progressive Voice on YouTube is my favorite progressive voice in America today. He's super kind, articulate. He knows his stuff, and it was a real treat to interview him. Forbes and I talk about what a second Trump term looks like, what a Biden term looks like, and just the general election and the state of affairs in America. So sit back, enjoy, and as always,
Free the bear. Grrr.
We have a really special guest today. Josh at New Progressive Voice is my favorite progressive YouTuber, podcaster, call him what you will, but by far my favorite. He's, I don't know how long you've been doing it, Josh, but what I love about you is that you didn't endorse a specific candidate. You endorsed ideas. And I think you're, in this age, especially I'll say for Forbes and I, we can be very erratic and angry sometimes. You seem to be very level-headed, and even though you're a YouTuber, you have the temperament of what I think would be a great politician. An overall good guy. So it's a real treat for me to have my favorite progressive voice on our second episode of Free the Bear. Although technically it'll be our fourth, because our first one we had to split into 3 parts. But thank you so much, Josh, for joining us.
You're welcome, and I'm just overwhelmed with the incredible openings. So thank you much, and keep it up. Keep it up if you can, anytime.
Josh is, Bill does not really kind of come up with this kind of stuff. He's not going out of his way to kind of make anyone buttered up. So again, I am trusting his judgment. So again, I appreciate you coming on, and again, Bill's excited, and so I'm excited. So thank you so much again.
And to find out more about Josh, go to New Progressive Voice on YouTube, and what is your Twitter feed?
Let's see. I always forget it because I don't even pay attention to it. I think it's just Joshua. Sorry about that. At NPV1 or for NPV1.
There you go. And it's.
Oh, sorry. Let me repeat that. It's Joshua at the NPV if you're doing a search in Twitter.
I do love your Twitter feed. It's probably my favorite one to follow as well. So definitely worth checking out. So I think the three of us, and if I'm wrong, you can correct me, all agree that Joe Biden would be a better president than Donald Trump. I think where a lot of progressives disagree is how much better he would be than Donald Trump. Is that safe to say for all of us?
Well, I would just, if I can jump in here, I would just say that, it's a very low bar. I mean, Donald Trump has done everything to destroy constitutional norms, social norms, anything else that you can think normal-wise. He is this, the proverbial bull in the china shop, and the china shop has all our constitutional Bill of Rights, and he's breaking every one of those left and right. And so, Joe Biden coming through, he's going to be better. But again, I kind of think my next door neighbor's better. I think that my cat's better. I think that anyone who has a pulse could be probably better 99 out of 100 times. So again, it's a low bar, but Biden would be better. Sure, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think you stated it in a very eloquent way, the idea that bull coming in and, everything's just kind of crashing down. And we do need a breather. I think that what we usually find is when you get a Democrat, people get concerned for the Second Amendment rights and things like that. But when we get, in this case with Trump, it's First Amendment. This is kind of like what we're up against. These are our two choices.
Yeah, it's a scary time. I mean, one part of Trump that people thought was alluring was that he was an outsider. Right now, with the coronavirus and all the things that are going on, I wish we had an insider now who knew all the right people to talk to, all the right government officials. So it's definitely a scary time. So Josh, I'm going to ask you, what does a second presidential term for Donald Trump look like in the future? What does that look like to you?
Wow. Do you have a lot of time?
Do.
We got all the time in the world because again, my computer was screwing up and Zoom would not let me into the podcast. So yeah, take your time because yeah, we're around for a while.
I would say basing it in two categories: one speculative, and the other one that seems very probable. And we can go by the first one based on what we have already gone through in the past 3 years. First and foremost, he definitely would be appointing ultra-conservative judges at the Supreme Court justice level as well as nationally. He's been trying to been very, very accelerating the rate at which you get conservative judges on district level, local level, etc. So that we can kiss, any additional work on climate change goodbye for the next 4 to 5 years. He won't take science seriously. If we have another crisis, we can expect he will likely, be question what people are saying. Does it fit his agenda? Self-serving, really, ultimately, whatever that agenda happens to be, philosophically or politically. We might also continue to expect, not knowing whether or not we'll ever actually have a deal with Iran, and making provocations with international leaders, not really honoring the constitutional pathway to engagement with the world abroad, continuing to line up with strongman authoritarian leaders as opposed to our allies. So continuation of breakdown of that. We won't likely have proper funding for the EPA. He's already pulling money out of that. Breakdown of the public sector, whether it's the post office or the public institution of education. A drift toward fascism and religiosity, not necessarily that he is religious, but he's really using that for his own ultimate gain. And he would continue to flirt with the idea of wanting to be president beyond the 4 years. I mean, whether or not we believe that would actually happen, I think we would want to question whether or not we would want to even give him that opportunity.
Yeah, and one thing that I would add, what I'm more scared about, I think, with Trump than anything, is voter restrictions. I think he will give the green light to people in the governor in Ohio or any swing state. I think is going to become exponentially more difficult to win if Trump wins, his second term.
Well, to me, the Trump second term is nightmarish from the American political experience, but from the global political experience, he is something that is, again, there's kind of a little bit of cheap talk that people want to say, well, this is the next Hitler. This is going to be this. This is going to be so kind of ugly and again, authoritarian. But he's kind of like the cheaper version. He's like the third-rate one. He is the one who is going to be the presidents of South Africa during apartheid, or some of these kind of half-assed dictators that we see are popping up in Eastern Europe, Putin-esque. There's no ideology really. They will use the props of religion, the state, historical experience whatsoever. But he's not. I don't have a feeling he's going to change the world, or he wants to change the world, I should say, like a Hitler type character. But he's going to be the one who's going to be my offspring are so special that I want to put them in as a political dynasty. Mm-hmm. Which you see in Latin American countries, like the Somozas in Nicaragua. That was a big thing. There was at least 2 or 3, I forget. But long story short, he just thinks that his offspring are special. He thinks that he's special enough that, again, he can do whatever he wants. But he's also kind of a lazy SOB. In certain ways, he'll screw over minorities. He'll, unleash the police on people because, again, that gives him cheap points in the trailer parks. But in the long term, I don't see this ideological edge. But, again, he really is something that most countries have run into sometime before. Again, Hitler kind of characters is a little bit too strong. But again, saying that he's harmless, or again saying that we can just have some kind of normality with him in charge, that's not happening.
I think that's right.
I think Josh, you made a great point about the environment, that he is going, not only is it bad for us, but I think more than anything, his pulling out of the Paris, it just makes us look bad. It makes people not want to trade with us. It makes people not want to come visit America. I don't know. Trump is very scary to me in his isolationist point of view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that brings up the continuation of his current trade policy, which will continue to impact Americans having to foot the bill on that, and continued subsidies to large agribusiness because the impact that tariffs have on farming. And likely a second tax bill that will make the first one look small, that mainly will go to the rich, trickle-down economy that ultimately does really well in the first 3 to 4 years, but beyond that, we start to see a repeat of the Depression, Reaganomics, George Bush. Eventually, it's going to catch up with us, and it's going to be really ugly. So those are some other things we can expect from a Trump second presidency.
One of my, I don't want to say favorite, but one of my most interesting stories about his tariffs and his trade war with China, Wisconsin had a very thriving ginseng business where Chinese executives would give as gifts to other executives Wisconsin ginseng. It was considered the gold standard for ginseng. It was like Napa wines or French wines. And then, so all these people in Wisconsin are growing ginseng. Ginseng takes, I believe, 9 years to grow. And then boom, it's all gone. Like they stopped, like it was too expensive to trade. And all these people in Wisconsin, all these farmers just got completely screwed. I think Wisconsin will be very interesting for that reason alone. And I know Iowa the same way. People they lost everything.
Yeah, another thing that I'm thinking of is how he tends to lean more radical right with social policies, but economically he tends to be, as we just talked about with free trade and trickle-down economics, and all of that together combined, he tends to be very divisive in his politics, and anyone that doesn't line up with his understanding of what he believes is going to move the nation forward economically, or that's going to serve into his own agenda, he uses the media, downcast it, and there's some truth in that, what he's saying, but he uses it to affect, calling anyone that's outside of his domain. So he's not a uniter, he's a divider, really. So we can expect that to continue, a form of radicalism, really, and how people respond to that message that might worsen over the course of the next 4 years. So anyone that's not in his mindset or going along with his agenda, it's hard to say exactly how he might react to that, because he can be very spontaneous and reactionary. And you can see some of that just the way he's responding to the protests.
Well, the big, what you kind of like hinted on was that this is the biggest problem with me, or biggest problem, I should say, when I'm thinking about the Donald Trump presidency, is that, we can lay a lot of problems on Trump. I mean, again, like Trump is doing reactionary things. He's being aggressive. He is having very poor, his thinking process is very poor, and which is kind of putting it lightly. But long story short is that whatever we want to say about Donald Trump, the person, Donald Trump, the president, he has a backing in multiple states. He has a backing that is hardcore and even cultish. And so, we can lay up everything about Trump, does this, Trump does that, but he can only get away with this by the fact that there are so many people in the United States of America as we know it currently, and also majorities in certain states, and also probably a majority of states if you actually look at the 50-state system. These people really are on board with these kind of policies. They're on board with, again, his attacks against protesters. They're on board with this whole kind of pseudo-masculine fascist cultism, and that's kind of a problem for us. I mean, again, you came on to the podcast here. This podcast is, again, we were talking about California independence. the reason why we have a problem right now, and the reason why we're thinking about independence in the first place, is that Donald Trump represents a major tumor in the cancer of the American political system. And we don't know what to do, but I think that Bill and others and people we've talked to are kind of like saying like, okay, we can't cut the tumor out, but we'll basically amputate ourselves from the rest of the system.
Yeah, and I guess that leads to another question I was going to ask you guys. Let's say Joe Biden wins. What happens to Trump supporters?
Wow.
They
Did
don't
you
go
want to
anywhere.
go ahead? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a really good question. They're definitely not going anywhere. We know that. Um, I definitely think they would probably find a way to redirect their efforts, their attention towards someone like Tom Cotton, for example, um, and try to ready themselves for the next general election. It's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, Tom Cotton is one of the guys I worry about. I'll go even a step
Well,
further.
Tom Cotton is the one who was like talking about using the 101st Airborne or something like that to basically
Yep.
try to restore order. So again, like military troops don't have experience with any kind of policing functions. I mean, that's just a fact. Like they're not built for that. They're not trained for that. What they're supposed to do is basically go in, destroy, conquer, done. They're not policemen. And again, like that's a huge problem. And again, like I think that a lot of the Republican right, especially the pro-Trump right, are just really trying to see how much ultra violence they can get away with to basically restore order, quote unquote, which is basically restoring the status quo, which was what caused this situation in the first place. And Tom Cotton, like those kind of people, they scared the shit out of me because, excuse my French, they scared me so much because they could almost be the smarter Trump. Trump is a lazy, Big Mac eating, hiding in the bunker type of person, and they could actually do better than him because of his laziness, because of the fact that he's again 73 years old, which is no offense against the elderly, but again, like you don't have the drive of an ideological warrior at that age for the most part.
Yeah, I think one of the advantages that Donald Trump has, his history of being in the media and knowing how to spin narrative, and he thrives on chaos. It's art of the deal, knowing how to propagate a message of victimhood and turn it into the strongman narrative. A lot of bluster, and they also have this. He has this way of using religion to make himself appear almost prophetic and messianic. So I'm not really sure if Tom Cotton is that way. I haven't really paid attention to him enough to know, but those are definitely things that would go greatly toward, if Trump gets reelected for another 4 years, that could drift the nation further right, making someone like Yang or Tulsi Gabbard look radically left. So this notion, or this sort of narrative that, if we elect Biden, people are going to go to sleep, we'll go into a malaise, and people are just going to want to get someone like Tom Cotton in to answer to that malaise, I don't think is true. In fact, I think the opposite may happen. It may actually, because of Trump's ability to manipulate and propagate his message so effectively, he could continue to drift things more to the right, to the point at which everyone else looks ridiculously, just even a moderate Democrat looks ridiculously left.
And, there was one thing that I found interesting. When Trump thought he was going to lose to Clinton, he was setting up his own online, I guess, the counter the Young Turks. It was going to be, Donald Trump, going to be his kids talking. He was going to get like the Ann Coulters. I could almost fear when Donald Trump isn't president that he'll become even more powerful just spreading his propaganda and hate. And that I think he's got such a strong base now in the Republican Party that any Republican who's going to have any success is going to have to kiss his ring. And he could even become more powerful not being president, being just the voice of hate for the next generation of Republicans.
If I
Uh,
can just, for Bill, just for 1 second, I know what you're saying, like, that Trump will be a kingmaker and that he will be able to wield power behind the scenes. But I think that there is a part of the Democratic establishment which I don't think is really friendly to the working class, the people of this country. But there's part of the Democratic establishment which really wants him to eat it. I think they're mad about the fact that he usurped Hillary Clinton. I think that they want to make sure that, again, like, what he was pulling off and, like, blowing through, kind of these, like, semi-innocent norms, like, again, like, the money going to certain friends, the money going towards his family, the Trump hotels thing. I think they want to make him eat it pretty bad. That being said, I don't think Trump will ever be on the sidelines. Trump either goes down with the ship or Trump is going to keep fighting. And I think that's already why he's, kind of putting forth the narrative that we keep hearing constantly about the rigged elections. Like, for example, like, oh, Newsom sent out all these ballots and he doesn't care who's going to sign up because, again, like, he's going to rig the popular vote in California. And, like, any kind of, like, mail-in ballot, even though it's been done since 1862, that's all like that's a ploy by these, insidious Democrats. He's really setting it up. So either Trump goes and wins, whatever that means, by hook or by crook, or I think that Trump will, again, be destroyed. And I don't think there's going to be a middle ground where he's going to be the kingmaker because they're not going to let him live politically. I don't think that's going to happen. There is a lot of the Clintonites who are, again, not friends of the working class, but definitely want to make sure that he goes down in flames.
Well, I have a question, if you don't mind, back to you, Bill, answering to or addressing your thoughts about Trump, what he might do if he doesn't get reelected. I think it goes to whether or not you believe he is mainly self-driven and self-interested, or is he invested in the nation, the United States? Because prior to him being president, was he ever really into politics? Did he move any agenda? I mean, is he using that position to further his own self-interest? That's really more so than, his concern for the nation as a whole. So what do you think about that? I mean, I think that really ultimately answers whether or not he will continue to make efforts to move political dialogue.
You guys might laugh at this, so I'm prepared because it's going to sound silly. I think all of this, I think him running for president is just out of anger and spite that Hollywood and the entertainment industry wouldn't embrace him after The Apprentice. He really wanted more than anything to be loved by the cool kids and the beautiful people. And if you look at his whole life before politics, I mean, he's like a McDonald's. He's a franchise. Like, he doesn't actually build anything. It's just his logo and his brand. He was all about being the New York, the Manhattan playboy. His biggest influence in politics or in anything is Howard Stern. You can go back to his interviews from the early 80s with Howard to the 90s where, Trump always talks about the ratings. Look at my ratings. Look how much people love me. I think his whole move to the far right was a tantrum and a result that he wasn't getting as much money on The Apprentice as he thought he should, that people weren't taking him seriously as an entertainer and as a, an A-lister. He wanted to be Oprah, his own version of Oprah, where he was this beloved playboy. And when Obama gave that speech, I don't know if it was the writer's speeches, the second to last year, where he was just...
It was the press correspondence. I know what you're talking about because it's a very famous clip where, again, Obama basically clowns on him, and you're going to see Trump has a look on his face. And then a lot of people think that was the kickoff.
I really think it was. It was things like that. Like, to me, Trump just wants attention. I'm sure I have a friend who's a psychologist who says it probably goes back to his dad not thinking much of him and wanting his father's approval. I think politics.
Yeah,
and I'll say Trump, you know what, if there was one thing you would look at Trump and be like, okay, like, I can respect this. He had a great feel on how to win an election. He didn't have advisors. This was all him. It was all about big rallies, this I am this bigger than life figure. I'm going to tell it like it is. He has changed politics. I mean, Hillary Clinton was groomed to be president. And
She should have almost had it. I mean, like, again, she was set up in so many ways. You're absolutely right. Again, like, you know, her connection with her husband, her whole life history was pretty much like, you know, she was the coronated one.
And yeah, so I think Trump becomes the endorser, and I think he becomes a Karl Rove type figure. And Andrew Yang said a lot of this great when Trump went to like places in Michigan and Wisconsin and was like, you guys are screwed. You guys have had horrible things happen to you. He was smart enough to feel their pain and make them feel like he was listening. Hillary Clinton never went to Michigan during the election. She was defending the economy, which, you know, stocks look good. You know, there's certain numbers that look good, but it didn't show the drug epidemic in rural America. It didn't show the jobs going away. And even though Trump's solutions are obviously terrible, he at least addressed the problems better than Clinton. And I think his populism, in a sad way, is going to be here to stay. And I think the Democrats are going to have to be equally as progressive as he is far right, I think, at the end to eventually win. We'll see what happens this time around.
I think you hit on something, authoritarian parenting. When you talked about his father, I think his father was actually part of the KKK, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if that's rumor. But, you know, there's sort of
I've
that
heard that too. And
understanding.
again, there was a newspaper article with that. Yeah.
Yeah, just generally the way he approaches the remedies for the problems of America is, you know, workism, very little government. In fact, let's dismantle the post office, let's dismantle the education system, let's make it all private. You know, sort of your Wild West, survival of the fittest mindset, and you know, the winner takes all, everyone else loses. That brings out the best in everyone, right? The sympathy is not necessarily about empathy. It's more that, yeah, you got it wrong. Let me tell you what's right to help you out of your pain. So that's kind of the way, you know, high demand and low responsiveness.
All right. So, guys, oh, sorry, Forbes. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, you know, like Trump's thing is very, you know, again, I've said this term multiple times, I think, in the last like 2 weeks. So again, if like, you know, if Bill, you already heard this multiple times from me, you know, Karl Marx used to have the phrase that, you know, the first time was tragedy, the second time was farce. That history, that's a good Freudian slip. History rhymes in ways. And then, like, I think that you're absolutely right. When you're talking about the fact that he was pissed off that he was not going to be like the cool celebrity and that he was kind of rejected by the celebrity community, he would have been more than happy just to be, you know, hobnobbing with like the, you know, the kind of the, how do you say it? Like the kind of like, you know, reality TV elites. That was his end goal, really. But then he saw he was rejected, and just like Hitler was rejected from the Art Academy, Trump needed to make people know that they should kind of eat it, and he went out of his way to kind of just blow up the elite. And you know, Trump is, whatever we want to think about him, whatever we can say about him, which is a lot. I'm sure we're on the same page. But he is a revolutionary in the fact that he destroyed the Clinton dynasty. Or actually, no, before that, he destroyed the Bush dynasty. Jeb Bush was supposed to be the coronated GOP nominee. We're supposed to have a Bush and Clinton 2016 election. And he destroyed Jeb Bush, and he completely crippled Clinton in the end. And I think that was all because, again, like you said, he was snubbed at the moment that he was supposed to have with the, you know, the celebrities. He was supposed to be, again, like, you know, again, the cool one. Again, he doesn't want to do any work. We all know that. I mean, like, for example, like, you know, he goes to golf courses like every 20 seconds. He has no interest in like further policy. Again, like, he's a lazy gangster for the most part. And but whatever being said, he knocked out the Clintons, he knocked out the Bushes. And that was because, again, they snubbed him, and he was trying to have just a nice, cozy presidency where he just didn't have to do much. But again, history caught up to him, and now we have a pandemic, which is still occurring. I don't care what anyone says. And also we have riots throughout the entire country.
Well, there you have it. Another episode of the Free the Bear podcast. Thank you very much for listening. If you can, give it a thumbs up. Even if you didn't like it, give it that good old thumbs up and subscribe. I'm very old, but I've been told there is a bell that you're supposed to push or ding or something. So do that. For more information about the California National Party, go to californianational.party or on Twitter, vote_CNP. And in conclusion,
Free the bear. Grrr.
hey, my name's Bill, and I'm here to say I want California independence in a major way. Whoa.